You know, I never thought I'd be the guy telling this story. 3 years ago, at 69, I couldn't even pick up my own grandchildren. The simplest things, tying my shoes, getting out of bed, walking up the stairs, they'd become these monumental challenges. Back pain had completely hijacked my life. I'd gone from the guy who coached Little League and hiked on weekends to someone who winced at the thought of getting up from the couch. The doctors. They just kept saying, "Well, Frank, this is what happens when you age," as if I was supposed to accept that the best years were behind me. But here I am now, at 72, and yesterday I helped my son move furniture into his new apartment. How did that happen? That's what I want to share with you today. I guess we should start at the beginning. I wasn't always in pain. For most of my life, I was that annoyingly active dad. Coached my kids' baseball teams, went camping, built a deck on our house, you name it. But somewhere in my mid-50s, things started changing. It was subtle at first. Just that morning stiffness that wouldn't quite go away by lunch. Then came the twinges when I'd bend over. By 60, I had what doctors called chronic lower back pain. I figured it was just part of getting older. My father had back problems. His father before him complained about his bad back. Seemed like a family tradition I was destined to inherit. The real turning point came when I was 65. I was playing with my granddaughter Emma in the backyard. She was 5 then, full of energy as kids that age are. She asked me to lift her up so she could reach an apple on our tree. Something I'd done 100 times before. But when I picked her up, it felt like someone had stabbed me right in the lower back. I nearly dropped her. Had to put her down and sit right there in the grass. The look on her face. Confusion, worry. She kept asking, "Are you okay, Grandpa?" And I wasn't. Not by a long shot. That was the moment I realized how much I'd lost. Not just mobility or strength, but moments. Important moments with the people I love. The next few years were a blur of doctor appointments, physical therapy sessions, and an ever-growing collection of back braces and heating pads. I tried everything the traditional medical route offered. Anti-inflammatory medications that upset my stomach. Cortisone injections that helped for a week, then wore off. Even had a doctor suggest surgery, but the success rates he quoted didn't exactly fill me with confidence. By 69, I'd pretty much given up. Accepted that this was my new normal. My wife, Janet, had to help me put on my socks in the morning. I'd given up gardening, something I'd loved all my life. Couldn't play golf anymore. Couldn't even sit through my grandkids' school performances without shifting uncomfortably every few minutes. I thought my active days were over. Completely over. Then came what I now call my grocery store miracle. I was at the supermarket, struggling to reach a box of cereal on the top shelf. Must have been quite a sight, this old guy grimacing, trying to stretch without setting off the fireworks in my back. That's when someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Bob, an old buddy from my working days. Hadn't seen him in years. Last time I'd seen him, he'd been worse off than me, walking with a cane hunched over. But here he was, standing straight as an arrow, easily reaching up to grab that cereal box for me. "Frank," he said. "Is that back still giving you grief?" I must have looked shocked because he laughed. "You're wondering what happened to the old broken-down Bob, aren't you?" We ended up talking right there in the cereal aisle for nearly an hour. He told me about how he'd finally found relief. After decades of suffering, it wasn't some miracle cure or expensive treatment. It was a comprehensive approach to spine health that addressed not just the symptoms, but the underlying causes. I remember thinking it sounded too good to be true. But the evidence was standing right in front of me. Bob was moving like a man 20 years younger. "Look," he said before we parted ways, "what have you got to lose? You've already lost so much to this pain. Why not try something different?" He was right. I'd tried everything the conventional route had to offer. What did I have to lose? The approach Bob recommended wasn't focused on quick fixes. It wasn't about masking symptoms or temporarily relieving pain. It was about rebuilding a healthy spine from the ground up. First thing I learned: back pain isn't just about your back. Sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but it was revolutionary to me. Your spine doesn't exist in isolation. It's connected to everything: your core muscles, your hips, your legs, even your feet. And more importantly, how you use all these parts affects your back health. The program I followed had 3 main components. First was movement, but not just any movement. Specific, gentle exercises designed to strengthen the muscles that support the spine without straining it. Second was nutrition. Turns out what you eat can either feed inflammation or fight it. And third was mindset, addressing the stress and tension that can manifest as physical pain. I started with just 10 minutes a day of gentle stretching and strengthening exercises. Nothing fancy. No special equipment needed. Just movements designed to improve flexibility and build core strength. I'll be honest, at first I was skeptical. How could these simple movements make a difference when all those medical treatments hadn't? But after 2 weeks, I noticed something. The morning stiffness wasn't quite as severe. I could get out of bed with a little less effort. It wasn't a miracle cure. I still had pain, but there was a difference. By the 1-month mark, I'd added another 10 minutes to my daily routine. Started paying attention to my posture throughout the day. Began making small changes to my diet, cutting back on sugar and processed foods that can cause inflammation. 3 months in, I had a routine. 20 minutes of spine-supporting exercises every morning. A 10-minute stretch before bed. Walking for 15 minutes after lunch. And I'd completely overhauled my diet, focusing on anti-inflammatory foods like fatty fish, colorful vegetables, and nuts. The changes were, well, they were remarkable. Not overnight, not miraculous, but steady and undeniable. 6 months into this new approach, I went a full day without taking pain medication. First time in years. I remember telling Janet that night, and we both got a little emotional. One aspect of recovery that really surprised me was the mind-body connection. I'd always dismissed that kind of talk as New Age nonsense. I was a practical guy, worked in construction management for 40 years. If you told me meditation would help my back pain, I'd have laughed you right out of the room. But here's what I learned: chronic pain changes your brain. It creates these pain pathways that get stronger and more sensitive over time. The longer you're in pain, the better your brain gets at feeling pain. It's like your pain dial gets turned up to 11 and stuck there. Part of my recovery involved techniques to calm my nervous system and essentially reset that pain dial. Simple breathing exercises. Brief meditation sessions. Even visualization techniques where I'd imagine my back healing, the muscles relaxing, the inflammation subsiding. Did I feel silly doing this at first? You bet I did. Janet caught me visualizing once and thought I was napping in the middle of the day. But I couldn't argue with the results. These mind-body techniques, combined with the physical exercises and dietary changes, were making a real difference. There was this moment, about 8 months into my journey. I was playing with my grandson Tyler in the backyard. He asked me to push him on the swing, something I hadn't been able to do for years. Without thinking, I just did it. Pushed him on that swing for 20 minutes straight. It wasn't until later that evening that I realized what had happened. I'd done an activity that would have left me in agony before, and I'd done it without pain, without even thinking about it. That's when I knew something fundamental had changed. It wasn't just that I was managing the pain better, I was actually healing. If there's one thing I want to emphasize, it's this: healing a back that's been in pain for decades takes time. There's no overnight fix, no magic pill. The changes happen gradually, sometimes so slowly you barely notice them. That's why consistency is so crucial. I made these exercises and habits part of my daily routine, just like brushing my teeth or having my morning coffee. Even on days when I didn't feel like it. Even on days when I didn't see any improvement. I stuck with it. And there were setbacks. Days when the pain would flare up again. Times when I'd overdo it and pay the price. One time, about 7 months in, I got overconfident and tried to help my son move a heavy table. Ended up in bed for 2 days afterward. But the difference was, I knew what to do now. I knew how to recover, how to get back on track. The key was patience. Understanding that healing isn't linear. It's more like the stock market, ups and downs day to day, but trending in the right direction over time. I kept a journal throughout this process, noting my pain levels, what exercises I did, how I felt afterward. Looking back at those entries now is eye-opening. There were weeks where I wrote the same thing every day. Still hurts. Wonder if this is working. But then, flipping ahead a month or two, I'd see entries like, walked 2 miles today. Back felt good. Those gradual improvements added up. By my 70th birthday, I was doing things I hadn't been able to do in a decade. By 71, friends who hadn't seen me in a while were asking what my secret was. Now, at 72, I sometimes forget I ever had back problems, until I meet someone who's suffering the way I used to, and it all comes flooding back. Beyond the specific exercises and techniques, I made broader lifestyle changes that supported my back health. Some were obvious, others less so. Sleep became a priority. I'd never realized how much poor sleep contributed to my pain. I invested in a better mattress, found the right pillow for spinal alignment, and established a consistent sleep schedule. The difference was remarkable. When I slept well, my pain levels were noticeably lower the next day. I changed how I moved throughout the day. Learned proper lifting techniques, using my legs, not my back. Started taking short movement breaks when sitting for long periods. Even changed how I got out of bed in the morning, rolling to my side first instead of sitting straight up, which puts strain on the lower back. Water intake was another surprising factor. Staying properly hydrated helps maintain the fluid content of the spinal discs, which act as cushions between the vertebrae. I started carrying a water bottle everywhere, aiming for at least 8 glasses a day. I also addressed stress in my life. Turns out stress causes muscle tension, which can exacerbate back pain. I found simple ways to manage stress, spending time in nature, doing hobbies I enjoy, connecting with friends. Janet and I even started taking ballroom dancing lessons, something we'd always wanted to try, but I'd been too pain-ridden to consider. These might seem like small, unrelated changes, but together they created an environment where my back could heal. It wasn't just about treating the pain, it was about creating a lifestyle that promoted spine health. One of the most insidious aspects of chronic back pain isn't just the physical limitations, it's how it erodes your confidence. After years of pain, I'd stopped trusting my own body. I'd turn down invitations, avoid activities, limit my life in countless ways because I was afraid of triggering pain. Rebuilding that confidence was perhaps the most rewarding part of this journey. It happened gradually, with each small success. The first time I bent down to tie my shoes without thinking about it. The day I realized I'd been gardening for 2 hours without a break. The morning I woke up and automatically reached for the pain medication, then realized I didn't need it. These victories accumulated, and with them came a renewed trust in my body. I started saying yes to things again. Accepted an invitation to go fishing with my son and grandsons. Volunteered to help with a community garden project. Took Janet on a weekend trip to the mountains, where we hiked trails I wouldn't have attempted 3 years earlier. There was this moment last summer. My daughter had organized a family reunion at a lake house. All the kids and grandkids were there. They were playing volleyball in the shallow water, and my grandson Tyler called out, "Grandpa, we need one more player." Without hesitation, I waded in and joined them. Played for nearly an hour. Diving for the ball, jumping, laughing. It wasn't until later that evening that I realized what a milestone that was. 3 years earlier, I couldn't have imagined being that active, that spontaneous, that free from the constant calculation of, will this hurt? How bad will it be? Is it worth it? That's what this journey has given me back. Not just a pain-free back, but a life without limitations. A chance to be the grandfather, the father, the husband I want to be. As my condition improved, I started sharing what I'd learned with others. It began casually, mentioning techniques to friends who complained about back pain, recommending resources that had helped me. But then something unexpected happened. People started seeking me out. Word spread in our community that Frank had figured out his back problems. I'd get calls from friends of friends asking for advice. My barber asked me to explain my exercises to his brother-in-law who was suffering. Even my doctor wanted to know more details about what had worked for me. I started keeping a folder of resources, articles, videos, book recommendations. Created a simple one-page summary of the approach that had helped me. Before long, I was holding informal sessions in our community center, sharing what I'd learned with others dealing with back pain. What struck me most during these conversations was how many people were in the same position I had been. They'd tried the conventional medical approaches. They'd been told their pain was just part of aging. They'd given up hope of improvement and resigned themselves to a limited life. Seeing the light return to someone's eyes when they realized there might be another way, that's become one of the most rewarding parts of my journey. I'm not a doctor or a physical therapist. I'm just a guy who found a path out of pain and wants to help others find their way too. One gentleman in particular stands out. Harold, 78 years old, had been using a walker for 3 years due to back pain. After 6 months of following the approach I shared, he graduated to a cane. 3 months after that, he walked into our community center using nothing but his own 2 legs. The applause that erupted in that room. I don't think there was a dry eye to be found. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about passing on what I'd learned to help others reclaim their lives too. So here I am at 72, more active and pain-free than I was at 60. I'm not saying I never have twinges or that I don't still have to be mindful of how I move. But the debilitating, life-limiting pain that defined my existence for so many years, that's gone. Last month, I helped my son move furniture into his new apartment. Last week, I played 18 holes of golf, walked the whole course. Yesterday, I got down on the floor to build Legos with my youngest granddaughter and got back up without a second thought. These ordinary moments, they're actually extraordinary when you've spent years thinking they were lost to you forever. If you're watching this and you're struggling with back pain, especially if you've been told it's just part of getting older, I want you to know that there's hope. Your situation might be different from mine. Your path to healing might look different too. But don't accept limitation as inevitable. Don't resign yourself to a life defined by what you can't do. I thought my active days were over. I was wrong. And I've never been happier to be wrong about anything in my life. If you found this story helpful, please consider subscribing to Healthy Back Living. We share practical tips, exercises, and inspiring stories like mine to help people reclaim their active lives, regardless of age. And if you know someone who's struggling with back pain, share this video with them. It might be the first step on their journey to recovery. Remember, your spine supports you in everything you do. Isn't it worth learning how to support it in return? Thank you for listening to my story. Here's to many more active years ahead for all of us.